And in your book, you talk about the different types of karma. And you say that it
Right.
kind of impact different areas of our life, such as finances, relationships, careers, family dynamics, as you just talked about, and health. Could you please elaborate on these different types of karma and
Right.
how can we identify whether or not we are facing karma in a certain area of our life?
Right. So, yeah. So, karma is what we're trying to say. There's karma is specific. So, in other words, if I break my leg, I'm not trying to fix my arm, I'm trying to fix my leg. So, sometimes I've heard people say things like, I'm such a nice person. Why am I going through all these financial troubles? Well, what does being a nice person have to do with knowing how to manage money? They're not the same thing, right? So, in other words, let's take money karma. That's one of the karmas, right? If I mismanage money, I'm creating money karma. So I may come back in another incarnation and face financial difficulties. Opposite, if I really handle money well, I may come into life and suddenly, boom, I know how to use money. It's a talent just like anything else. So if I notice that, say, I am a nice person, but I'm chronically dealing with financial issues. Now, look, every one of us have a bump on the road. I'm not talking about that. But if it's like a chronic financial issue,
Recurring
yeah, or
challenges.
it's always there. I have some people I know they're always dealing with money issues and
Yeah.
then you dig a little deeper. They just don't know how to handle money, and their attitude is like, "I don't have enough. I'm broke." It's what we call the lack and limitation. I mean, you live in a town right now that's a lot about wealth.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Very true.
Yeah,
A lot of people with
right?
good
But
money
they
karma
do
out
have
here.
that consciousness. Now, it doesn't always mean they're nice people. You can have the talent of wealth, but not be a kind person. And that
Oh,
creates
yeah.
karma related potentially to relationships. So that's
Mm.
what I mean. We mean is the karma will
They're all
happen. So it could,
interconnected.
they're interconnected, but they're in their own lanes. So if it's a relationship karma, you got to deal with it with a relationship. If it's financial karma, you got to deal with it financial. If it is physical karma, I forget the author that said our bodies are apt to be our autobiography. Why do some people come in with a strong, healthy, pleasing body? Another one, a very weak, almost sickly body at birth. Now, again, put aside things that can happen in the womb and things like that, but that can be physical karma. If the biblical quote, an eye for an eye, did not actually mean if if you poke my eye out, I'm going to poke your eye out right back. What it meant is if you poke someone's eye out, somewhere down the line, you're going to experience blindness to understand what you did. And then the soul, once it goes through that experience, will say, I will never do that again.
Mm.
So
Can you
we're
talk
trying,
a little bit about relationship karma? Because I know there are a lot of singles these days struggling to find Mr. or Miss Right. And it
Mr.
seems
and
like
Miss Right. Yeah.
it's something that's very prevalent in the younger generations, Gen Z and millennials.
Right.
So what are
Right.
your thoughts on that? Like, why is that happening? Is that like a karmic thing younger
Well,
generations?
part of it is I think some of the social expectations and norms are changing right now. Let's say compared to my generation, where there was a little more, I don't know if
Yeah,
the
like
roles
baby
were
boomers,
clear.
a lot more
Yeah,
stable and you stay with your spouses for a lot
right,
longer.
right, right. So the point is, now you can look at this a couple different ways. Again, it's sort of what are your goals? Do you want to have a family? All right. What is it you want to create in your life? Now, one of the things we teach, and this is connected, you probably read this in the book, is there is a tapestry of life for every single one of us. This is a vision that was given to us before we incarnated as to some of the key things we're meant to accomplish in our future life. And that includes things, it's not everything, obviously, but it's things like, okay, the kind of family you're going to be born into. If you yourself are going to marry, are you going to have children? Because there's no such thing as a purely biological pregnancy. Because what is happening? A pregnancy is about another soul coming into the world. So by definition, the spirit is involved in the pregnancy. This is why sometimes if couples are trying to have a child and they're not successful, well, there may not be karmic for that to have that child, and it won't happen until somehow things are meant to be in that way. So as far as, romance, the other thing is you have to kind of, I know in a way it sounds almost unromantic at first, but you got to kind of plan out what is it you really want from somebody else. I don't mean necessarily looks. What kind of a person do you want? What are you looking for in a relationship? And put aside what anybody else is saying, put aside any of the norms out there. This is where the meditation helps. You go kind of into yourself and you kind of feel, what is it I'm really wanting? And again, is it simply companionship? Is it simply romance? Or is it deeper? Am I looking for a marriage partner? So the clearer you start to become with what's important for you, put aside the pressure, the social pressures around you, then you start to have this clearer picture, because if it's not clear in your mind, how is it going to be clear out there? It's got to be clear with yourself, right? So the nice things I think right now is that because we're kind of more aware of things, actually, I think there's more opportunity than ever to have deeper and richer personal relationships in a romantic and a marital state, because now the world has just grown up a little more, right? So it means you have more opportunity to put attention. There can be better management of the roles between each other and who's doing what. So I would see this as a time of more opportunity, but also being more careful. I look at my nieces now that are in their early 20s, and I have to say, my brother did a great job and his wife raising them up, and they're very clear in their mind the kind of person they want in their life. And they didn't fall for a lot of the teenage trappings and all that kind of stuff. So they didn't focus on the things that were so frivolous that could distract your attention. So they've got all this vitality now to put their attention to where it's important. When we're in our teenage years, we're really, okay, in the auric field, you reach full maturity at 16 years old. Put aside what the laws are saying, right? But karmically, you become fully responsible for your actions at 16 because you're fully empowered in your spiritual energies. Now, we think of what a lot of the 16-year-olds do today at 17 years old. Is it always the most productive, thinking about their futures, a clear, sober mind? Those are the things you need, because that will set you in your course in your life. And if you had those things, if you had that good mindset, great. If not, you can always self-correct. But again, don't let yourself be the victim. And kind of like what we were saying about early in the talk here, when there's this peer pressure. Let's say I had my spiritual awakening. Well, don't let peer pressure control you, because if it does, you'll always be a victim.
So is that where free will and choices come into the picture?
Absolutely. And to marry somebody, let's say, well, that person's in your tapestry, but guess what? You're in their tapestry, right? So there's an expression of the universe is conspiring for your success. But let's say here's the person I'm meant to marry, but I'm completely enamored of this person over here. I'm getting a little distracted, right? Here's Mr. and Miss Right, but I'm looking over here. So again, this is why we got to bring the divine. Now, this is the other thing I would say here. It's not just about two people. It's about two people and the divine. God is part, especially in a marriage scenario. It doesn't have to be in a religious context, but God is in the midst of that marriage. And that's what you want to invite into your life, that there's this divine piece of the puzzle. And that's what brings everything into cooperation. I think the problem right now is in today's society, one of them is it's become too materialistic.
That's true.
It's too focused. In my generation, there was still, the religious foundations were still strong. And that gave you a certain sense of stability. When you take God out of the equation, a society is going to crumble.
Yeah, there are more agnostics and atheists these days.
That's what, yeah, a lot of them are.
Western world especially.
Right. Now, in general, people still are spiritually minded in the world, but we have to bring the divine or God back into the equation. Now, I'm not saying go back to ancient customs, but I'm saying we have to kind of find God. Actually, one of the things we teach is finding God in the 21st century. We see the world as getting better, not worse, and heading to a more beautiful age. But the science has done a great disservice, the material science, to making people think we're just atoms bouncing around the universe. That's completely false. Our bodies are composed of atoms, but that is not who we are. You are not your body. You are inhabiting your body. There's an immortal soul in your body, an immortal soul in my body, and that's not even of this earth. We're here for a visit, right? The body's going to go back dust to dust eventually, but the soul is going to go on. So the important thing is to stay connected to the soul, which inherently is divine and inherently is part of something greater. And when you have that sense of greater, there's a natural sense of confidence that you're not just wandering like a tumbleweed through life.